in this unprecedented situation. An attack on humanity, the likes of which none of us have ever experienced. There is little in recorded history to compare this plague that to some degree has impacted each of us, irrespective of race, ethnicity, status, or position. I know from my own experience and from conversations with others that this has felt like a rupture of sorts, challenging each of us physically, emotionally, spiritually. The world looks different than it did a month ago. As one modern theologian observes, here we suddenly see our vulnerability. We have been coasting along for the better part of half a century in unprecedented affluence, unprecedented freedom, unprecedented optimism. And all of a sudden, we are facing the fragility and vulnerability of the human situation. Therapist Lori Gottlieb expounds on this idea in her widely shared New York Times piece, breaking it down in terms that certainly resonate. Right now, in addition to the tragic losses of life and health and jobs, are the losses experienced by people of all ages. Missed graduations and proms, canceled sports tournaments and performances, postponed weddings and vacations, separation from family and friends when we need them most. We've also lost the predictability that we take for granted in our daily lives. That there will be eggs and toilet paper on supermarket shelves, that we can safely touch a doorknob with our bare hands, that we can get a haircut or our teeth cleaned, or spend a Saturday afternoon at the movies. It seems none of us are immune to the overwhelming effects of the coronavirus, infecting, isolating, and impacting each of us. The recent festival of Passover offered us a lens through which many have found meaning in our current situation. The holiday offered a fitting framework to share what it feels like for each of us to navigate our own Mitzrayim, our own places of struggle and constriction today. This year, we relate to the 10 plagues differently. In past years, they seemed as nothing more than hyperbole. However, the world looks different right now. The notion of a plague suddenly feels eerily relatable. The traditional Passover Torah reading resonates differently this year too. Earlier this week, we read in Parshat Beshalach about the Israelites' release from Egypt and the ensuing miracle at the Red Sea. The Torah tells us that when Pharaoh is told that the people have fled, he has a change of heart and sends an army in the hundreds of thousands to stop the Israelites and bring them back. As the story goes, the Israelites find themselves trapped with the great sea of reeds before them, and behind them, Pharaoh is charging chariots. As I shared earlier this week on Facebook, the Israelites respond by crying out to God. This seems predictable when we are dealing in the realm of biblical stories. But God's response, however, might surprise you. In hearing the people's cry, God says to Moses, "Why do you cry out to me? Tell the people to go forward." In that moment of terror and desperation, our biblical ancestors cry out in faith to God, and God's response is to encourage the people to simply walk forward, to continue on. As hard as it may have looked for them in that moment, God demands the people continue along their way, doing what they know they must to eventually escape from their collective nightmare and emerge a free people. The Hebrew word there used is vayisa'u, go ahead. go forward. Unlike other times in Torah when God addresses the people as a whole using a singular verb, here, Vayisa'u is conjugated in the plural. In this portion, God is speaking to the collective people of Israel, instructing each of them to continue along their way, doing what each of them must, so that all of them can safely cross the deep sea and continue on towards the promised land. This, I believe, is the lesson for us this week. Just as God did for our biblical ancestors, God calls us too, telling us in this challenging moment to simply continue forward. We must continue on our journey, doing that which sustains us and will help propel us forward in our collective return. If this pandemic has taught us anything, it's that my actions impact your life and your behavior impacts mine. We are inextricably connected. As Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks teaches, that this crisis has revealed the inescapably interlinked nature of our humanity, the covenant of human solidarity, as he puts it, the thing that makes each of us not only an I, but part of the greater human we. This next phase in our liturgical calendar, the period that we are currently in, called the counting of the Omer, offers us a structure for moving forward. The Omer, or sheaf, was a harvest offering brought to the temple on the second day of Passover. We're commanded from that day to count 49 days, 7, the number of wholeness and creation, times 7, leading up to the next festival, Shavuot, the day we now celebrate as the day we received Torah at Mount Sinai. Unlike our New Year's Eve, this is not a countdown, but a counting up, mirroring our biblical narrative of the people's ascent from slavery to revelation at Mount Sinai. A journey one step at a time, one obstacle after another, together. So what does this all mean for us as we navigate this ongoing COVID-19 crisis? I would suggest the answer is twofold. First, this crisis has confirmed our inextricably connected existence. Therefore, we each must do what we can to preserve and protect all lives. That means we must continue to stay at home, as boring and bothersome it is at times, so that we can continue to flatten the curve, preventing further spread of the virus. We must continue to wash our hands again and again throughout the day, and consider other ways to do good for those we love, for those with whom we live. We should also reach out to family and friends and neighbors as often as possible, particularly the most vulnerable and isolated among us, demonstrating our care and our need to help others get through this too. Secondly, despite this horrific pandemic, we must acknowledge our fortune at this season and give thanks that we are able to continue to count our days and experience the fullness of our lives. Tonight at 6:15 Shabbat service, we have invited the young woman who was originally scheduled to become bat mitzvah this Shabbat and her family to help lead our prayers. We'll also offer a birthday blessing for all those celebrating their birthday here in this month of April. Moving forward, we know means to continue to choose life, marking special occasions and coming together in community to celebrate and experience the joy of Shabbat. Today is the 28th day of stay at home and the 8th day of the Omer. May we find inspiration in our recent Torah reading. And Vayisa'u, go forward, just as our ancestors did so many millennia ago. May we go from strength to strength, marking our collective journey with moments of appreciation, gratitude, and the embrace of community. That, we read in Torah, is what it means to be free. Wishing you and your families a Shabbat Shalom. May this Shabbat be one of peace and of blessing